All right, welcome to the show. The next person we have up for the interviews today is Daniel McAdams, freedom-minded Daniel McAdams. So I can't wait for this interview to happen. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Pasta to Go. I'm your host, Craig Pasta Jardula. Our next guest and our final one for the day is the liberty-minded guy. He's done some work for the Ron Paul Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, he's made it such a great name for himself. Daniel McAdams is with us.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you again.
It's always a pleasure, and it's kind of cool because you helped me out with the whole filming of my pilot project, and we asked one of the questions there was peace through strength. We'll get to that question later down the road, but right now, I want to know from your personal opinion, was Nicolas Maduro kidnapped or was he captured? Is there some legitimacy behind the fact that he was wanted by an American court?
No, of course not. He's the head of a foreign state. You have sovereign immunity if you are the head of a foreign state. I mean, President Trump has been arguing in front of the Supreme Court that he is completely immune from anything he does in the course of his duties as the president of the United States, including, by the way, the 100 or so people he's blown out of the water off of Venezuela. So you can't just go, you can't have your own Department of Justice issue an indictment against a foreign leader and then go and kidnap the person to face justice in that country. It's absolutely absurd. It's absurd on its face.
Yeah. So what about the oil, though? I'm sorry. Donald Trump makes all these claims that the Chavistas stole American equipment. In other words, the Americans came in, they built a whole infrastructure there. The Chavistas had a revolution, and they stole from American companies what is property of the American companies. Is there any legitimacy to that claim, Daniel?
Well, ironically, one of the beefs against Venezuela under Chavez and Maduro is that they have state-owned enterprises. How ironic that President Trump treats our own oil companies as state-run enterprises. If a private company goes in and makes a deal to operate in another country, they assume a certain amount of risk. That's what every investment assumes, a certain amount of risk. And there obviously would be a higher risk in a place like Venezuela. These so-called private companies were told they're private. They went in there and they assumed those risks and they planned on making tons of money. Well, things didn't go as they had hoped, and a few decades ago, that oil industry was socialized. Was made a state. The state took over the oil industry, but it didn't end there. There was plenty of time. And I don't know all the details about the trials, but the cases went to court. There was money paid back to the U.S. companies. And I think Chavez also did some additional deprivatization. But that was solved as well. So the idea, ironically, that these are our oil. I don't have an oil company. Do you have one, Pasta? I didn't lose the damn thing over there. So this whole idea that when a U.S. corporation loses money, it's somehow my problem. You and I have got to cough up the money. What the hell is that? How does that make sense?
I love when you take this position. I remember when you did the work with us on that pilot last April, and my good friend Gerard Michaels, who will be doing some interviews with us in a couple of weeks, when he said, well, shouldn't we, referring to us as the American government, shouldn't we take these resources and do that? It's not like they're knocking on your door and showing up, hey, we overthrew the Maduro government. Here's a check for $6,000 for your cut over there. It's like we never ever see any of the finances. What are your thoughts on moving forward? I know you don't have a crystal ball, Daniel, but you must have an opinion. What do you think is going to happen when it comes to the citizenry of Venezuela? Do you think they're going to take this standing down? I mean, this is an armed citizenry. They've been armed ever since the revolution when they kidnapped Hugo Chavez. He started arming the population. The population is armed, and the government really isn't technically overthrown. Delcy Rodriguez was the vice president. She was a Chavista too, as well. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen next with these countries? You might not have ever been to Venezuela, but you got to have an opinion about what's going on over there. You think they're going to take this lying down?
Well, if I could just say one thing before we move on, because you made a good point about no one's handing us $6,000 checks. Well, there's one person who's going to get multi-billion-dollar checks, and that's a guy called Paul Singer. He's the one that bought Citgo in November for a song. Remember that same old Paul Singer? He was the chief financier of Marco Rubio for president. So here he comes along and steals Citgo in November, and that's right at the time when they were ginning up this idea that there is a foreign narco-terrorist organization, the Cartel of the Suns, that's run by Maduro. The whole thing, we could talk about it later, Apostle, was an absolute lie. But he's got to be making billions off of this. This is old corruption. This is corruption on a scale that I think would even make the Bidens blush. And maybe we can talk about it later. But to your question, what will happen next? What I fear will happen next, and you're seeing some signs of it already, is a civil war. And there was an article in the New York Times, I guess about a month ago or so, that the U.S. government, I think the CIA, had gamed this out. What happens if we overthrow Maduro? And it turns out it will end up in a civil war. And so that's what we may be seeing happening right now. And don't forget, we have tons of CIA people on the ground. Who knows what they're doing? Who knows what kind of mischief they're doing? Who knows who is getting offed? Who's getting bribed? Who's getting extorted? All sorts of very, very dangerous things are happening right now in a country that is extraordinarily complex in terms of its geography, in terms of social factors, in terms of its economics and politics. So right now you have a recipe for disaster. This gang, this U.S. gang that went in there, had no freaking clue what they were doing. They had no idea. They had no the day after plan. They had no, okay, we're going to take this guy out and then we're going to do X. They have no idea, no plan. We just went in there and broke a lot of things like we did in Libya. And now, unfortunately, the people of Venezuela, who've already suffered a lot from U.S. sanctions and other things, are going to have to pay the price. And I think that price, sadly enough, is going to be paid in blood.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the fact that you think there might be a civil war. I got a call from somebody in Venezuela today on the ground. He says the oppositional figures are actually uniting with the pro-Chavistas, that they are so pissed off that the United States government is telling them what to do, that they're even joining right now with the Chavistas. So I don't even think we'll have a civil war because, in fact, Hugo Chavez was able to get this kind of nationalist bourgeoisie to go along with the Chavistas and wait out the American imperialists. So that's very, very interesting. My fourth question is this. A lot of Trump supporters, and we'll go with and this will be a good spot. Right after this question, we'll get to the cartel question, and we'll talk about this little Paul Singer thing that's going on. But right now, I want you to answer this question. We hear a lot of Trump supporters stating that phrase that we had talked about several months ago, peace through strength, Daniel. This is peace through strength. Is this any type of different foreign policy that we witnessed in the past? Because you got figures like J.D. Vance and, our favorite Lindsey Graham saying, finally, we have a president that has the guts to do what other presidents say they would do. Is this more of the same, or is this something different in our foreign policy we're witnessing?
Finally, we have a president who not only doesn't give a damn about international law and the international order, but proudly advertises the fact that he doesn't care about it. The problem with a lot of these right wingers is that they assume that following international law and doing things and not doing things like extrajudicial killings, if you oppose that, then you're weak. You have no strength. Well, the opposite is true. The reason there are such things as international law, international norms, are to protect the U.S. as much as anyone else. Just like after World War II, after World War I, we had the Geneva Conventions to protect our own military from future horrors in war. So this whole idea that, we peace through strength. We blew up, 25 or 50 boats in the water and assassinated and executed these people, burned them alive. That's not strength. That's a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
It's a sign of desperation. So yeah, there's a lot of chest beating going on, just like there was a lot of chest beating. I remember back in '02 when Shock and Awe was launched about Iraq. The same attitudes were unleashed. The same, oh, we told you, anti-war people, you guys are a bunch of wimps. You guys are a bunch of morons. And then what happens, just weeks later, after mission accomplished, everything goes to hell. So it's not strength implies restraint, right? Restraint. Um, and that's something that this current administration doesn't seem to be able to exercise whatsoever.
So why can't Americans? I once again crystal ball, but it's a very brief history where we learned in the Iran Contra scandal that the cartels were working directly with the CIA. We have no evidence that's been changed whatsoever. With these actions taking right now in Venezuela, we see a lot of puffery. I think that's the word that you were probably the best word. We saw a lot of puffery from a lot of members of Congress that want to go into Mexico next without the permission from the Mexican government and take out the cartels. How come America hasn't learned this brief, just recent history lesson that the cartels are working directly with the CIA? In fact, Daniel, we have connections, we have proof that a lot of the cartels' banking is used by Western banking. Why is this forgotten?
Well, it's an inconvenient truth, but this is something, as you say, that's been known for decades. I mean, yeah, we know they're involved in drugs because we're in business with them. I mean, it reminds me of if you remember, in the run up to the Iraq War, with this whole thing about Saddam Hussein having chemical precursors. And I actually leaked a document that I found that I had handed to me from the banking committee to Bob Novak at the time, and he wrote a great article about it. Yeah, we knew that he had them because we sold them to him. So it's the same thing. We know they're trafficking this stuff because we're in business. Now, I shouldn't say we. The CIA is in business with them, and it's very, very well known. Uh, you know,
Yeah. I think the you froze for a little while, but I think the Paul Singer deal and what you're talking about is he bought Citco for pennies on the dollar back in November. I think it was signed over by Juan Guaido, right? I think he's the one who put his name on it. I know Guaido, even though he wasn't the legitimate president, was doing deals and selling off resources and seized assets from the government. And right now we have Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president, who was a Chavista. Of course, she is a Chavista and stuff like that. I don't know if people have a lot of trust in her, and some people are trying to say that this looks very familiar with what's going on in Syria. As far as the next guy coming in, going to the World Bank, going to the IMF, making deals. Why don't you unpack what was going on with Paul Singer and his relationship to Rubio real quickly, since you're ahead of the curve and you were able to explain this about what's going on with Citco and Paul Singer?
and not only involvement with Rubio, but a major funder of President Trump and President Trump's campaign this time. I mean, tens of millions of dollars. And for you and I don't know, Possum, you may be selling pasta on the side, making a lot of money. But for me, 15, 20, $30 million is a lot of money. But if you're a rich guy like Singer, you give 30 million in donations and you get Citgo and you're going to make $50 billion, or something of that nature. Well, that's a heck of an investment, and that's what it's all about. That's why there's this whole lie, that they had to sell to the American people. I mean, this whole cartel of the Suns lie is the WMDs from Iraq. That's literally what it is. That was the one thing they had to make stick. He's not just a socialist. He's not just a bad guy, but he is the leader of a narco-terrorist cartel that is at war with us whether we like it or not. You had to create this. Well, the first indictment, of course, was completely full of that rhetoric. And then they did an updated indictment yesterday, and every reference but two minor references to the cartel of the Suns was removed. That was simply in there as window dressing. And so now we have a foreign president facing trial in New York for the ownership of machine guns in opposition to a 1934 U.S. law on firearms. I mean, it can't get any more absurd than this. And the only other thing they have him on is conspiracy to traffic drugs and sort of corruption charges. They had corruption. He's overseeing corruption. Thank God we don't have any of that in our government. But the whole ground has fallen out from underneath this narco terrorism nonsense, because they used it to get what they wanted, and that's what they did. It was a big lie.
Does U.S. foreign policy lead to mass migration? This is something I was talking to Thomas Massey with at the Libertarian Convention. He disagreed that our foreign policy led to the mass migration. As an anti-imperialist leftist, me, I always said the reason why we have so much mass migration is that we have bases all over the place, and they're not just renting space. It's not the Boy Scouts hanging out there. It's an actual occupation. Do you believe that does our U.S. foreign policy lead to mass migration?
Well, I don't know the entire context of your discussion with Thomas Massey, and I hold him in the highest esteem. But I certainly do believe there's a factor. I mean, U.S. sanctions against Venezuela for decades, because we don't like who they voted for. Well, that led to mass migrations to the U.S. The same was true in the Middle East. The meddling in Syria. Not meddling is too kind of a word. The destruction of Syria, the destruction of Gaddafi. With regard to the Middle East, a lot of that went to Europe, but still, you do see the U.S. Aggressive foreign policy overseas. I mean, we destroy their economies. The whole purpose of sanctions is not to hurt the presidents and the elites; it's to hurt the little guy. So the little guy becomes so miserable that he would even give up his life to overthrow the government. So the entire purpose of sanctions is to put the squeeze on working class people, people who can't afford to see the food prices double. That's the whole purpose. So how in the heck are we surprised when you squeeze someone that much and they say, "Look, I got to get out of here. I don't care. I've got to find some better life somewhere." It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah. In that discussion with Thomas Massey, he disagreed with the fact that it led to mass migration. He felt the welfare state was one of the driving forces, but he did agree that sanctions are bad, that we shouldn't be sanctioning people. We shouldn't be labeling or classifying countries as, terrorist organizations, because that just eliminates Congress. Not that Congress is doing anyways, but it gives the executive branch more power to do what they want. They can just simply go around all the hurdles that are there. And he definitely believed that we should defund the CIA in those areas that are starting all those problems. So that was the height of our conversation. Do you believe that this particular overthrow of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela has something to do with the potential to go to war with Iran? In other words, if we back Israel going back to war with Iran, the Iranians shut down the Straits of Hormuz. That's going to hurt, oil oil reserves moving around, oil exports, I should say. It could shut it down. It could really sack the market. Do you believe that this attack on Venezuela had something to do with the fact that we might be bombing? Israel might be bombing Iran, and if Israel bombs Iran, we technically bomb Iran.
Yeah, I've heard that theory. I'm not entirely convinced because, from what I understand, I mean, I think there's a certain misunderstanding among the right wing influencers who are all behind this, which is that there's this sweet, delicious, juicy Venezuelan oil just sitting there waiting for you to turn the dial, open up your boat, turn the dial, and fill her up, boys. From what I understand, there's been a lot of neglect. The infrastructure is in bad shape. Venezuelan oil is very difficult to mine. I'm not an expert on this topic, but from what I understand, the type of oil is very difficult to extract from the ground. It's also very expensive, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Even President Trump himself said yesterday that this could take years to rebuild their oil export sector. Of course, then he went full corporatist and said, and we are going to subsidize American oil companies for them to do it. So, suck on that, Americans. There's your stimulus check here. It's going to the oil companies. But yeah, I've heard that theory. I just don't think, from what I understand about the nature of Venezuelan oil, in terms of just getting it out of the ground, but also if you look at the terrain of Venezuela, if you do have some sort of an insurgency in Venezuela, if you do have some, as you point out, a well-armed population, there are also insurgent groups that have been operating for decades in there. It'll be easy to destroy the infrastructure of the oil inside the country as well. So if that's what you're betting on, man, you need to hang out with Paul Singer more because he's a much better gambler than that.
Uh, Donald Trump, he kind of campaigned as a nationalist. America first, America first. We have a tweet here from a Rothschild. And the Rothschilds, Nat Rothschild, and this got almost 10 million views. Go ahead and throw it up, Jayme. 10 million views. Well done, Donald J. Trump. Hashtag Venezuela Libre. Is Donald Trump a nationalist who's serving the benefit of his citizens in the United States, or is he a globalist who's serving the benefit of the ruling class of the world?
Well, like you point out, America first can mean whatever you want. And unfortunately, the same is true with nationalism. I mean, in the United States, we have this movement of national conservatism that's led by an Israeli, Yoam Hazony, right? And they have conferences about this. They want to define nationalism as, yeah, you are Israel first, of course, and then America second. So there is that. Is Trump a nationalist? I don't think Trump has an ideology at all. I mean, and I'm not a never Trumper. I mean, people will think, oh my gosh, did you ever criticize Obama? Yes, for 8 years, and Biden, yes, for 4 years. But I think Trump at the end of the day is sort of a nihilist. He doesn't really believe in anything. He's an egotistical nihilist. And I think that one of the reasons why they didn't take Machado, which was a smart move, is because he was I don't know if I could say this word, but pissed off that she took the Nobel Prize that was his, and it infuriated him. So I don't think he has an ideological bone in his body. Yeah. So and you can see that from his campaigning. You pointed out there was a viral thing on X yesterday where it was Trump announcing that we're going to run Venezuela. And then there are like 5 or 6 speeches after it from the campaign saying, no more nation building, no more regime change. We're out of that business. I just don't think he cares. I mean, he just doesn't care.
Yeah. Give us the money, Lebowski. We fuck you up. Last question. How does it feel that a liberty-minded guy like yourself, I almost called you a libertarian because you're not. I apologize and stuff like that. How does it feel that a liberty-minded guy, his closest allies or the parallels close to him, are people from the anti-imperialist left? That's gotta, you gotta like that somewhat, no?
It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, the Ron Paul Institute is not a libertarian organization. It's a coalition organization, and that's why one of the first things I did when we decided to start it is call up my good friend Dennis Kucinich and ask him to serve on our board. And of course he said yes. So we're all about coalitions. We may have our private views on things like the Second Amendment or what have you, but we joined together in the opposition to war, the opposition of central banking. The Fed impoverishes the poor in America by facilitating wars. So there are a lot of really important things that we agree on. And plus, I don't even know where the right and left are, or even if that's a word anymore. It's gone so beyond that. So I'm happy to work with honest people. And, Hudson, that's why I've been happy to work with you over the years. I like working with honest people who don't screw around.
I think what Jayme put up on the stream is what it's all about. The alignment right now, I think, is between imperialist and anti-imperialist, and that's what's going on. And I definitely love what you have to say. And Dr. Paul over there at the Ron Paul Institute, you guys do amazing work. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging in there. I know you're not feeling too well, but you really drove it home today. Daniel McAdams, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having you on. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. That was Pasta to Go. Those were the interviews. We want to thank you for joining in. All the ways to help the show are down below. We'll be back this Thursday. We have 3 new guests on the show. We're going to start off with Ryan Christian at 11:15 a.m. from The Last American Vagabond. Kyle Lanzalone, you know him from the Libertarian Institution and antiwar.com. And then we're going to throw a Marxist in there, Wyatt Reed, managing editor of the Gray Zone. It should be an interesting conversation. We're going to kick it off 11:15. Tomorrow, the Convo Couch will start at, Truth Wire, no longer the Convo Couch, will start at 12:15. We have on Steven Sefton, who is a journalist, a radio jockey. Is that what you call him right now? He's an activist. He lives in Nicaragua. We're going to talk a little bit about Nicaragua because they might be up next on the chopping block, and we're going to go into the reasons why. And of course, then Wednesday night at 4 p.m. Eastern on WBAI, I have my call-in radio show, Drive Time. We will love you to participate there. And then we'll follow back up Thursday on Pasta to Go with the interviews. Please, if you haven't joined up or signed up to be a member or a follower, supporter of Pasta to Go, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, and we'll see you tomorrow.